Welcome everybody to today's episode of Sip and Style. I am joined here by a professional photographer, Rob Paolo, who is absolutely doing amazing work on Instagram. I saw some of his content and some of his pictures, and I just had to have you on the show. I saw all your beautiful photography, and I've honestly never seen photography work like this.
Wow, I really appreciate that, man. Thank you.
So, I mean, it really kind of brings up, first question for you is how long have you been doing photography for?
So, coming up on 8 years.
8 years?
8 years.
Okay. And then how did you kind of get into it? Like, was it something, a passion project of yourself, for yourself? How did you kind of get into it?
For me, back in the day, I used to skateboard, and I always said, like, oh, I would love to be a photographer. And, I kind of never really did anything with it. And I had a few point-and-shoot cameras, a couple film cameras growing up, but I never really got into it. I was in the music scene for a little while, and I got a camera for a honeymoon that I was going to go on, and I started watching videos on like how to use the camera and all these things, and the obsession started.
Yeah.
And I like literally got out of the music scene and just started doing photography. I watched countless YouTube videos on like how to learn, like how to expose, how to work the camera, and then it was just a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, so a lot of trial and errors. So you were looking up YouTube videos to really figure out a lot of the ins and outs of it.
All of it.
All of it.
Self-taught.
Self-taught.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, photography, I really do think is a very intricate profession. I mean, you really have to know things and to be able to self-teach yourself all of that, and to be able to do that, I think is really cool. What's like a piece of advice if there was somebody out there who was younger or older, certainly, but wants to get into photography? What's a piece of advice you'd give to them?
Watch a lot of videos.
Watch a lot of videos.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
I did that a lot when I'm the type of person, like I'm not afraid to ask the questions. So I asked everybody that I could if I didn't know something, like, so inspired by people on Instagram, I would reach out, hey, how'd you do that? But I would say watch a lot of videos, figure out like what you like, what you want to shoot, and go shoot it.
Yeah.
And or just take your camera everywhere you go, and if you see something cool, get out and take it, and then bring it home and edit it.
Yeah.
And just start learning what your style is.
Yeah, 100%. So for you, you were just, getting into it. You were kind of, figuring out what was it that drove you to kind of to do this?
So at first, it wasn't about like, being employed or working. I was intrigued by the night photography. I was intrigued by long exposure photography, like streaking the buses, cityscapes at night, because things just pop at night. It's really beautiful, and I was really intrigued by that. And then I started like posting my stuff on Instagram, and someone asked like, "Hey, can you take photos of me and my family?" And I was like, "Sure, I've never done it before, but I'm gonna do it." So I wasn't scared to put myself out there and try something new. And then it just started taking off from there.
That's awesome. So, it was, just kind of expose yourself to that nightlife photography. What are some other styles that you're aware of that a young or, another photographer could be considering while they're kind of figuring all this out? What are some styles of photography that somebody might consider?
I think don't get me wrong, it's not easy to actually do it well, but it's easy to go out and do. It would be like street photography, like walking around, capturing somebody walking through like a crosswalk or anything like that, or walking past the sign, or, just figuring out how to frame your shots. Like that would be a good way to practice. You can get into like doing headshots. That's a good way to make pretty good money. But you have to learn how to use flash photography as well. Figure out backdrops, and you have to expose the camera, you have to expose the flash, but when you do it well, it looks really good. You can get into family photography, like going to the beach and taking pictures of people on the beach. That's a good way of practice and learning and actually making some income.
Yeah, you've mentioned multiple different styles there. One thing I was very curious about, when you're somebody who wants to monetize this type of work, I feel like everybody is, a lot of people out there are aspiring photographers, but not a lot of people get to that point where I think you've been able to achieve, some monetary success with this. What would you say is the difference between you and your average photographer who, is not able to monetize it?
I would say I'm a hustler. I'm a go-getter. I'm not afraid to put myself in situations where I may not know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And just putting my work out there. Like, I grinded on Instagram for a very long time. Since I started photography, I've been posting on Instagram and Facebook. People would see it, they would reach out to me, they would ask if I could do something, and then I would ask other people, hey, what did you charge for this? Because I didn't want to be the guy starting out like the free photographer. I didn't really want to do that. I started really low. I think my first shoot was like $100.
Yeah.
And I gave like way too many photos. So people out there, don't do that. That's kind of how it started for me. So then I would post that work, and then people would post that work, and it just kind of trickled from there. So then it was like, hey, can you shoot my wedding? And I was like, yeah, I've never done it before, but I didn't tell them that, but I'll do it. So I did my first wedding for like $500, which don't do that either. And then I would post that, and then I would post. Another way I made money was I would posting all these photos on Instagram and Facebook. People say, hey, is that available for print? So I was like, absolutely. What would you like it printed on? And then, I didn't know what I was doing, so I just figured it out. And then, I started out printing on canvas. And then when I learned about metal, which is actually aluminum prints, those are super high def. They look amazing. And I just started selling a lot of prints. So that was able to make me some money. And then that money was able to buy more equipment, and it just kept building from there.
And which you mentioned equipment, which kind of brings up another question for me. I reached out to a good friend to get all this equipment for the podcast. I had a lot of questions about this. In your expertise, where's a good starting point, and then where's a good goal point for as far as cameras goes? What are you using, and for your style, and then is that the best all around, or is there some other equipment that you would recommend more so for headshots and family photography versus what you do, which is very night heavy?
Right.
What are you using, and then what's a good place for somebody else to go if they were considering some of these other options?
So that's a pretty vast question, because there's so many different cameras, there's so many different lenses. First and foremost, I would say, if you're thinking about getting a camera, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to do it professionally, or are you just starting out? Do you want to buy a very base model camera? The problem with, at least for me, knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't have started out on a base model, because I eventually went to a full frame, if that makes sense. So I started on a crop sensor camera, which is just I can get into all the specs of it if you would like, but it's so basically a crop sensor camera is whatever your lens is, there's a crop factor of 1.5 or 1.6. Canon's 1.6, and Nikon and Sony are 1.5. So if your lens is 20 millimeters, it's actually 35 millimeters, because you have to add the 1.5. So it crops in. So you're not actually getting 20 millimeters, which for me, I really wanted the wide shots. And until I went to full frame, that's when I was able to actually get the wide angle lens that I was looking for. What I currently shoot with is I'm a Sony shooter. I started with the A7 III. Now I have the A7 IV, and I have the Sony ZV-E1 for video. The camera is great. Sony is really good in low light, which for night stuff is really good. But when you're shooting long exposure, you don't really need to have the best night camera, because you're keeping the shutter open longer. So it allows more light to come in. So you don't really need a low light camera for that per se. For someone starting out, if they're not super serious about it, just maybe find a used camera and see if you really like it. Go to a pawn shop. But really what comes down to is the lens. The lens is what really makes or breaks. Obviously the megapixels would be great, But having a good lens, I would say, don't spend as much money on a camera, buy a good lens.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's different lenses for different things. So
Right.
like headshots, I like to use my 85 millimeter. Some people like 50. For street stuff, I like, anywhere from 14 to 50, so it just depends on what you do. Weddings, it could vary, A good starting lens though, for somebody that may not know what they want to do, a 24 to 70 is like a great lens to have in your kit. So 24 millimeter to 70. So you have the somewhat wide and then pretty tight.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice, and I think really good information. What are you editing on? Because I know my wife is somebody who has dabbled with photography, and she's always told me Lightroom is the gold standard. Is there other things, or are you using Lightroom, or are you using something else?
I use a few different programs, but mostly it's Lightroom and Photoshop.
Okay.
When I started out, like your wife said, it was the standard Lightroom. There are other programs I didn't really dabble too much. I just went for like what was on YouTube the most, and it was I use Lightroom Classic, and I use Photoshop.
Okay.
And Photoshop was a very scary program for me in the beginning, but picking it up throughout the years, nothing crazy with Photoshop, no photo manipulation or stuff like that, but just using it to actually dial in my colors better.
Yeah. So I'm very obviously, forgive me for not knowing any of this, but what's easier to use, Photoshop or Lightroom?
Lightroom.
Lightroom.
For me.
Yeah, it's just a more intuitive program, seems. Okay.
I mean, it's a lot. You can do a lot in Lightroom. And when I first started out, that's all I used. And then I saw I asked people how are you doing this? And they're like, well, I start in Lightroom and I finish in Photoshop. And I was like, all right, well, I probably need to do that too.
Yeah.
So it just, you can have a little bit more control of the colors and your contrast and everything in Photoshop.
Okay.
So I go back and forth between the two, almost
Gotcha.
every photo.
What are some editing tips you would give to a newer photographer? Obviously, you're somebody who's I did look at some of your work. Some of the stuff you shot, some of the landscapes were breathtaking.
Thank you.
Like you almost felt like you were there. Like I've seen photos, I've taken photos of things and then looked at it myself when I was at a beautiful place, and the photo didn't do it justice. Your photo almost, I feel like, does it justice.
That's cool. Appreciate that.
For the landscape shots you were shooting, and it almost, I say this, and I know you don't do this, but it almost felt like AI, which is a credit to your work.
I appreciate that.
What are some things, some settings, some things you're doing in Lightroom and in Photoshop that's really allowing you to capture that moment, or does it just come down to the camera?
So it comes down to, first and foremost, I think you're talking about some of my recent landscape photos. The landscape itself was beautiful.
Yeah.
The light, the cloud inversion, the water, the reflection, all of that stuff plays a huge part, of actually what I'm capturing. And then it's finding the composition of how do I want to frame this shot so it looks like you said, you're there.
Yeah.
And then it's the settings of how I shot it. So in photography, there's a way that you can shoot brackets. So I took I think 5-shot bracket where it takes 5 different exposures of the same scene. So I get a very bright photo, I get a not so bright photo, and so on and so forth, and I get a really dark photo. And then when you merge those all together, you have all of that information, and then I edit from there. So then I don't go too crazy, but I just try to keep it natural, but add my own little touch to it, which I like the orange and blue and the reds in my photos. Not too keen on green. I don't know why. I just think it looks ugly in my photos. But for someone starting out and learning to adjust the sliders, because that's what you do in Lightroom, is you can adjust the sliders. You can literally see what's happening. So when I first did it, I was just going like this with the sliders just to see how far should I go. And I started out, and I like most people do when they start out, they push the slider too far, too much saturation, too much orange, too much red, or whatever. So I would say wherever you think when you're starting out, if you think it looks good there, maybe dial it back just a little bit. And then eventually you'll come into your own style.
what's a good piece of advice that you would give to, somebody new just getting into photography, around being able to capture the best image? Because a lot of people, right? They say as a photographer, you have to have a good eye, right? You have to have a good eye. Is that something is that something that you can, you didn't have as good of an eye 8 years ago, or is that something that you've been able to work on, or you just had since day one?
I'm pretty sure I had it.
Yeah.
I had the eye. But a good starting point for somebody just starting out, if they don't necessarily have the eye, or if they have the eye, there's a thing called the rule of thirds. And that's like 3 lines this way, or 2 lines this way and 2 lines this way, and then it gives you thirds, right? So like top left corner, that would be a third. Top right corner, that would be a third. Bottom left corner, like if you're looking at a grid, and if you frame a shot in the middle, like if you see in a lot of movies, for instance, like when you're framed out, like if this is the frame, if I put you on the third, it looks more interesting than if you were just dead in the center and you had all this other space. It's just called the rule of thirds. So for you people out there, if you really want to know, just look up the rule of thirds, and then you can use that with your eye and then figure out good compositions.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice and such valuable information for the young photographer. What's something you're working on right now that's very exciting to you?
For me right now, I'm really trying to focus all my energy on real estate media.
Okay.
I've been doing that for about 1.5 years now. It's been a learning curve. I shadowed a friend of mine that was willing to teach me how to do it. 'Cause, like, again, I'm not afraid to ask for help. So
you're always new to a certain genre.
yeah. I mean, here's the deal with photography or video. Like, you're always going to be learning. You're never going to not need to know something or learn something different, because there's so many different facets to photography. But what I'm really trying to focus on right now is building a real estate business. And it's a process. It's a lot more involved than you would think for just going out and shooting a house.
One final question, just overall camera usage. How important is it, from your experience, to know all the settings and to know your tool and know your tool that you're working with inside and out? How important?
I think it's super important. I mean, if you're going to have the tool, you should know how to use it, right? So, and that's why, like, in the beginning, it took me so long to like actually get out and shoot, watching all those videos, because I didn't know how to use the tool. I knew how to turn it on, and that was it. So like you have to learn about exposure. So you have to figure out what buttons do what. There's 3 different things that control exposure. It's aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So like I would focus on learning those things. Knowing the camera when you're in a situation where, like, let's say you're shooting a wedding, if you don't know your tool and the light changes and you don't know what to do, like, you're gonna miss the shot. So it's super important to understand, like, what focus area to be in. Is it autofocus single, continuous? Like, when you're shooting a wedding, you want to be in continuous, so you need to know those things. You need to know, because the subject is going to be moving, you want to keep it in autofocus continuous, so like when they're moving, they're in focus. So there's a lot to it.
Definitely. Definitely encourage people to read the manuals and certainly watch videos.
I'm not a manual guy, so I'm a visual learner. So
so watching videos.
Watch videos, man.
Yeah, watch videos on your equipment.
I still watch videos on everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you ever dabble in any videography or no?
I have been recently. Well, with doing the real estate media, I've had to learn how to do video and work a gimbal. Like, I didn't know how to do any of that, so like I invested in myself. I took a workshop in Nashville. I learned how to, the mechanics of the gimbal, and then I just went out and started doing it.
Yeah.
Watch videos on how to balance it, because that was challenging. I didn't know how to do that. So, but yeah, video is a whole different animal.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I believe so. I believe it. Yeah, what's because I mean, obviously, I just got this camera that we're shooting on today, and having you in here is kind of a unique opportunity to maybe play around with some of the settings. What are because I'm just shooting it in plain like camera
Auto.
mode, camera auto mode, right? So like, what are some settings that I can play with on the video side of things that you might make this a little bit more dynamic?
So it just depends, like what you're shooting, right? So like
Podcast,
this is static. So you could get away with 4K 24, so 24 frames per second, because you don't really need to slow anything down. 60 frames per second would be more for like slow mo. So like when I film my real estate stuff, I'm in 4K 60. And just so you know, like whatever your frame rate is, like 60 frames per second, you have to double your shutter speed. So that means I'm in like 120 shutter speed. So for this, you would be in 24 frames per second. Your shutter speed would be about 1/50th.
Yeah.
And then your ISO would depend on the rest of the light that's available in here, which you have lit pretty well. So
Pretty good, pretty decent lighting.
But then it's like
I did good. I did good.
Yeah, it looks good. Well, I haven't seen the video yet, but I'm sure it looks good.
Hopefully, right? Well, I do have one fully edited and about to go up today, so that's
Oh,
exciting.
nice. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Rob, it was super awesome to have you on the show. We're going to end it here, and I'd definitely be excited to have you back on the show.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Thank
man,
you very much.
absolutely. And so with style, I would, let's have a little cheers. Cheers. Thank you, my friend.